Violent crime in the United States is on the rise.
Major crimes had gone up nearly 60%.
Major cities saw a 33% jump in homicides.
If you've turned on the news in the past year, you've likely seen reporting on the nationwide increase in violent crime. Is this the 80s and 90s all over again? Is it merely a political talking point? Neither? Let's take a look. Is violent crime on the rise? So the short answer is sort of. According to FBI data, some violent crime rates rose significantly from 2019 to 2020, most notably the murder rate, which rose by almost 30%. The rates of other crimes, like robbery and property crime, decreased. Though the rates of murders, as well as assaults, rose, they remained below the high points seen in the early 1990s. By 2021, the 2020 spike in violent crime had already leveled off a bit. But even in the places where violent crime increased, why and how rates rose is more complex than some of the theories currently being thrown around. Myth 1. Progressive prosecutors are to blame. Many Republican and even some Democratic politicians and pundits have claimed that progressive district attorneys have contributed to the rise in crime over the past few years.
Shootings and thefts are also up in places like New York, LA, San Francisco.
Whose fault is that?
It's a combination. Our criminal justice system, the laws that we have passed, and the failure to prosecute those who are committing crimes, and judges who are not utilizing the power that they have.
This argument places blame on prosecutors who have sent defendants to treatment programs instead of prison, or recommended against cash bail for those in pretrial detention.
There's no evidence to support the claim that progressive prosecutors have somehow contributed to the rise in violent crime in their jurisdictions or around the country. And we now have really good evidence showing that.
This is Ames Grauert, Senior Counsel in the Justice Program at the Brennan Center for Justice. He co-authored a report delving into the rise in violent crime over the past few years and the reasons behind this trend. One example of the evidence Grauert is referring to that debunks the progressive prosecutor myth can be found in a 2021 paper published with the Law and Economics Center at George Mason University. The report looked at data from 35 jurisdictions with so-called progressive prosecutors and found that there were no significant effects of these reforms on local crime rates. A common conservative talking point, however, is that crime is mainly spiking in liberal cities.
Look where it's not safe. Look where murder is skyrocketing. Look at Chicago. Look at Portland.
9 out of 10 cities where the spike's happening are led by overwhelmingly liberal politicians.
Myth 2. Blue jurisdictions have higher crime rates. In reality, the data shows that the crime rates in blue cities aren't any higher than crime rates in red cities. In fact, in some red regions, it's the opposite.
Rates of violence, rates of gun violence especially, are much higher in the South than the Northeast. They're much higher in so-called red states.
According to an analysis of data by the centrist think tank Third Way, 8 of the 10 states with the highest murder rates in the US are red. And another look at the numbers by crime analyst Jeff Asher shows that murder rates rising in 2020 didn't correlate with the party affiliation of a city's mayor. Moreover, Grauert says the incline in murder rates wasn't unique to cities.
The murder rate rose around the country in red and blue states, in red and blue cities, in suburbs, rural areas, major cities, everywhere.
Despite this evidence, conservatives have continued to peddle another false narrative. And that leads us to myth 3. Anti-policing protests cause crime to spike.
After a year of scrutiny over controversial police use of force incidents, some cities are starting to limit what officers can do.
In the wake of radical left-wing efforts to defund the police, it's no surprise that violent crime is on the rise in America.
After 2015, there was a narrative that emerged around the so-called Ferguson Effect.
Comey is suggesting that increased scrutiny of police tactics in the wake of the Ferguson unrest and the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement has police holding back.
The best research on that is grounded in 2015 and shows no reason to believe that the so-called Ferguson effect existed. There's no reason to think it happened in 2020 either.
The takeaway?
Trying to fit the increase in violence in 2020 into a simple political narrative like this just simply doesn't square with the evidence.
We know what isn't causing crime to increase, so what is? The answer is complex, but available data points to a few possible factors. One factor is guns.
America is on a gun buying spree.
Gun and ammo sales surged during the pandemic.
Shelves at local gun stores are emptying as handgun sales skyrocket.
In 2020, gun sales went through the roof, reaching an all-time high, and this record correlated with another. Roughly 77% of murders were committed with a firearm in 2020, the highest ever reported to the FBI going back to 1960. Additionally, the number of guns used in a crime within 6 months of being purchased rose from 13% between 2015 and 2019 to 23% in 2020.
All that adds up to a very strong picture that gun violence is sort of behind the increase in murders and potentially also behind the increase in assault.
Another key factor potentially contributing to the uptick in violence is the COVID-19 pandemic. People who are already disadvantaged, those struggling with poverty, unemployment, health issues, and a range of other socioeconomic problems, were most impacted by the pandemic. Moreover, there was a breakdown in community. People weren't able to come together and create a sense of safety with each other. And the pause on commuting also impacted programs specifically designed to prevent violence.
We know, for example, that summer youth employment programs are a very powerful way of reducing violence in neighborhoods. Those programs simply couldn't be run. You can't do it over Zoom, and you can't do it during a respiratory virus pandemic. These are factors that might have affected communities of all types, not just cities, but also in rural areas and suburbs as well.
So we know that guns and socioeconomic insecurity contributed to the rise in violent crime. The question now is, what are solutions that work to reduce crime?
There's strong evidence that investing in our communities can help build a long-term vision of public safety.
Community investment can look like many things, and we've seen what works. For instance, in Oakland, California, homicides and non-fatal shootings were nearly cut in half as of 2019, since the city began a community violence intervention program in 2012.
I think the best time to make these investments in our communities was, in fact, a quarter century ago, but the second best time to make those investments is today.